Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Right.
If you're prepping for the UPSC, you're in the right place. We've got daily deep dives into those crucial current affairs topics.
That's right. Those topics you're going to see on both the prelims and the mains exams.
Exactly. And today we're tackling Indian urbanization head-on.
Definitely a hot topic.
Oh, absolutely. And we're going deep with this Indian Express article, Indian Urbanization, Challenges and Solutions. It really gets into the nitty-gritty.
The problems, the potential solutions, all of it.
Yeah, it's a great read. Get ready for some seriously shocking statistics, some fascinating case studies, and
Hopefully some light bulb moments, right? The kind that'll help you ace those exams.
that's the goal. All right, so let's jump right into it.
Let's do it.
The scale of the challenge here is just massive.
Huge. And every UPSC aspirant needs to understand the magnitude of what we're talking about.
Okay, so paint a picture for us. How big are we talking?
Okay, try to wrap your head around this.
Yeah.
By 2036, over 600 million people will be living in Indian cities.
Well,
That's more than double the entire population of the U.S. crammed into Indian cities.
that's incredible. That's not just about needing more housing.
No, it's everything. Resources, infrastructure, governance, everything is going to be stretched to the limit.
And the article really highlights this whole explosion of census towns as a huge part of the issue.
Yeah, these places that are essentially urban, but officially they're not.
Right, so they're kind of stuck in this weird in-between zone.
Exactly, and it creates this huge problem.
So how many of these census towns are we even talking about?
Okay, so in 2001, there were 1,362 of them. By 2011, that number shot up to 3,894.
Wow, so in just 10 years.
They accounted for a third of all urban growth in India.
It's mind-boggling. But why is this lack of official recognition such a big deal?
Well, because they're classified as rural, they basically miss out on all the funding and development initiatives that are specifically aimed at urban areas.
Ah, I see. So it's like they're falling through the cracks.
Precisely.
Oh.
And it's a huge issue because they're rapidly urbanizing, but without the resources and planning to make that growth sustainable.
So what does that actually look like on the ground? What are the consequences of this?
Think about a rapidly growing population without access to clean water, without proper sanitation, inadequate housing, overcrowded transportation systems.
It sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It is, and unfortunately we're seeing these consequences play out in cities across India.
That's a really sobering thought. And it brings us to another huge challenge highlighted in the article. Pollution.
Oh, it's a crisis. There's no other way to put it.
I mean, the statistic that 42 Indian cities are among the top 50 most polluted in the world, that's just mind-blowing.
It's a stark reality, and it's something every UPSC aspirant needs to understand in depth.
So this is clearly not just an environmental issue then, right?
Absolutely not. It's got huge implications for public health, economic development, even social equity.
I mean, the cost of healthcare alone.
Think about it. Respiratory illnesses, heart disease, all these things linked to air pollution. It's a drain on resources, a burden on families.
And on the economic side.
It's costing India billions of dollars every year. Tourism takes a hit, foreign investment goes down. It's a vicious cycle.
Wow. So the economic impact is real too. And then you layer on top of this the whole issue of climate change.
Which the article directly links to the pollution problem, and rightfully so.
Right. It's like climate change is this threat multiplier, making everything worse.
And we're already seeing the impacts, the floods in Mumbai and Bengaluru, the heat waves across North India.
Those are just the tip of the iceberg, aren't they?
I'm afraid so. And one thing that really worries me is the lack of green infrastructure in many Indian cities.
You mean like trees and parks and stuff?
Exactly, because without that, cities become these concrete jungles that absorb and radiate heat, making those heat waves even worse.
So the urban heat island effect everyone's talking about.
That's it. And then you have the problem of runoff and flooding when there's not enough green space to absorb the water.
So it's all interconnected, isn't it? The pollution, the climate change, the lack of infrastructure, it's all part of this complex web.
A web that UPSC aspirants need to understand inside and out.
Absolutely, because it's not just about knowing the facts, it's about connecting the dots and seeing how all these things impact each other.
And ultimately, it's about using that knowledge to craft effective policy solutions.
Solutions that address the root causes, not just the symptoms.
Exactly. It's about creating a vision for a future where Indian cities are not just growing, but thriving in a sustainable way.
That's a great point. And speaking of sustainability, the article also highlights the issue of water stress and waste mismanagement.
Oh, that's a critical piece of the puzzle, and honestly, it's pretty alarming what's happening.
Yeah, the article doesn't sugarcoat it. It talks about how iconic rivers like the Yamuna and Ganga are basically becoming toxic waterways.
It's heartbreaking, really. And then you have cities like Bengaluru and Chennai struggling with both water scarcity and contamination.
So how did we get to this point? I mean, India has so much rainfall, it seems counterintuitive that water would be such a problem.
Well, it's a combination of factors. We have outdated water management practices, rampant overextraction of groundwater, and a severe lack of investment in water treatment infrastructure.
It's like we're essentially poisoning our own water sources.
And then, to make matters worse, less than 1/5 of the waste generated in India is actually treated.
So all that untreated waste ends up polluting our rivers and lakes.
Exactly. It's a classic example of how short-sighted policies and neglect can create a cascading crisis.
And on top of all this, we have the issue of governance gaps and urban planning failures.
Right, and this is where the problem of census towns really comes into play again.
Because they lack that official urban recognition, they're often left to fend for themselves.
Exactly. They're dealing with all these challenges, the rapid population growth, the pollution, the water stress, but without the resources or planning to address them effectively.
It's like a perfect storm, isn't it? And the article suggests that this isn't just a problem in census towns, but a broader pattern across many Indian cities.
Yes, there's this sense that urban planning and governance in India is often playing catch-up, struggling to keep pace with the rapid rate of urbanization.
So what's the solution? What can India do to turn things around?
Well, the article suggests that we can learn a lot from cities around the world that have successfully tackled these challenges.
Like who? What cities are doing things right?
It mentions cities like Bangkok, London, Dubai, and Singapore as examples.
Okay, so what are they doing differently?
Well, take Bangkok, for instance. They've invested heavily in a really efficient metro system and implemented tourism-friendly policies.
So they're making it easy for people to get around and attracting visitors at the same time.
Exactly. London is another good example. They're known for their well-planned transportation networks and their vibrant cultural scene.
It's like they've found that balance between functionality and livability.
And then you have Dubai, which has become a hub for business and investment, thanks to their forward-thinking urban planning policies.
And Singapore, of course, is always held up as the gold standard for sustainable urban development.
Singapore is really the model of what's possible with a combination of strong governance, smart city initiatives, and a commitment to green infrastructure.
So they're not just building a city, they're building an ecosystem.
Exactly. They've managed to overcome challenges like overcrowding and pollution through meticulous planning and innovation.
It's impressive, and it makes you wonder, what can India learn from these success stories?
I think the key takeaway is that it's not just about technology or money. It's about having a vision, a clear understanding of the challenges, and the political will to make bold decisions.
And that's something that every UPSC aspirant should be thinking about, right?
Absolutely, because ultimately the future of India's cities depends on the people who will be shaping policy in the years to come.
People like you who are listening to this deep dive right now. So let's keep this conversation going.
Absolutely. We've laid out the challenges. Now it's time to delve into the solutions.
And that's what we'll be doing in part 2 of this deep dive. So stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're tackling this massive issue of Indian urbanization, a topic that's not just relevant for UPSC aspirants.
Yeah, but crucial for understanding where India is headed in the future, really.
Absolutely. In part 1, we really laid out those stark realities.
The pollution, the water stress, the vulnerability to climate change, it's a lot.
It is. But now we need to shift gears a bit and look at some potential solutions.
Because, it's easy to get bogged down in all the negativity.
Oh, for sure. But as we always say here on the deep dive, understanding the problems.
That's the first step towards finding solutions, right? Exactly. And remember, for those UPSC exams, you've got to go beyond just knowing what the problems are.
It's about analyzing why they exist and, most importantly, proposing how to fix them.
Exactly. And the how is what we're going to dig into now. So this article we've been talking about, it really emphasizes this idea that transforming Indian cities,
it's going to require a complete overhaul. Planning, governance, financing, everything.
Yeah, it might sound a little daunting, but let's break it down step by step and see what it actually means.
Okay, that sounds like a good plan. Let's start with planning. I mean, we can't just keep building these concrete jungles, right?
No, definitely not. The article talks about the need for integrated planning, which basically means
thinking about everything together, not in isolation.
Exactly. So imagine a city where public transportation is the backbone, not an afterthought.
Where people can walk to work, to the store, to the park.
Exactly. Where green spaces are integrated into the urban fabric, not just little patches here and there.
It's about creating an ecosystem, right? Not
Hmm.
just a collection of buildings and roads.
Exactly. And that brings us to the next piece, governance.
Which, as we talked about earlier, can be a bit of a mess in some Indian cities.
Yeah, we need much better coordination between all those different agencies that are responsible for making the city run.
Water, waste, transportation, housing, it all needs to work together seamlessly.
But right now, it's often very siloed, which leads to inefficiencies and conflicting priorities.
It's like everyone's working on their own little piece of the puzzle without seeing the big picture.
Exactly. And then, of course, you have the whole financing piece.
Yeah, all this sounds expensive. Where's the money going to come from?
That's a big question. And the article talks about exploring different options like public-private partnerships.
Okay, so getting private companies involved.
Exactly. Attracting foreign investment, even issuing green bonds specifically for sustainable urban projects.
So thinking outside the box when it comes to funding.
Exactly. It's about being creative and exploring all the possibilities.
So those are some of the big picture ideas. But let's get a little more concrete. What are some specific examples of solutions that are actually being implemented in India?
Okay, so on the planning front, some cities are starting to experiment with transit-oriented development.
So what does that mean exactly?
Well, it means designing neighborhoods around major public transportation hubs.
So people can easily live, work, and play without needing to rely on cars all the time.
Exactly. It reduces traffic congestion, encourages walking and cycling, and just makes the city more livable overall.
That sounds like a win-win. And what about on the governance side? Any interesting innovations there?
Well, some cities are experimenting with participatory budgeting.
So getting citizens more involved in the decision-making process.
Exactly. It gives people a say in how local funds are allocated, which increases transparency and accountability.
That's a great idea. It really empowers people to shape their own communities.
And hopefully it leads to projects that better reflect the needs of the people who actually live there.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about the pollution crisis. Are there any out-of-the-box approaches being tried there?
Definitely. One thing that's gaining a lot of traction is using smart traffic management systems.
Smart is in using technology to improve efficiency.
Exactly. These systems use sensors and data to optimize traffic flow, which can really reduce congestion and emissions.
So instead of building more roads, we're making better use of the roads we already have.
Exactly. It's a much smarter approach, and it can have a big impact.
Now, what about water management? Are there any creative solutions emerging in that area?
There are. Rainwater harvesting is becoming more widespread, which is a great way to conserve water.
Especially in a country like India that has such a strong monsoon season.
Exactly. And some cities are even exploring ways to recycle wastewater.
Wastewater, like sewage.
Yeah, but it can be treated and used for things like irrigation or industrial purposes.
Oh, wow. So we're talking about turning a waste product into a resource.
Exactly. It's about finding those innovative solutions that can help us address multiple challenges at once.
Wow. Okay, so we've got some promising solutions for planning, governance, pollution, and water. But what about the big elephant in the room? Climate change. How can Indian cities adapt to those impacts that are already happening and prepare for those that are yet to come?
That's the big question, isn't it? And the key word here is resilience.
Being able to bounce back from those shocks.
Exactly. And it means investing in flood-resistant infrastructure.
Okay, so being prepared for those extreme weather events.
Right. And developing heat action plans to protect vulnerable populations during those intense heat waves.
So making sure people have access to cooling centers and other resources.
Exactly. And of course, creating more green spaces to absorb rainwater and reduce that urban heat island effect.
So it's about both mitigating the causes of climate change and adapting to the consequences.
Exactly. And it's going to require a big shift in mindset, not just from policymakers.
But from citizens as well, right?
Absolutely. Building sustainable cities is a collective effort.
It's about creating a sense of ownership and responsibility for our shared urban spaces.
And that's where education and awareness campaigns can play a big role.
So people understand the importance of things like conserving water, reducing waste, choosing public transport over private cars.
Exactly. It's about fostering a culture of environmental responsibility.
So it's not just about top-down government interventions.
No, it's also about bottom-up, community-driven initiatives.
It's about finding that sweet spot where government policies and citizen action come together to create lasting change.
Exactly. And that's what we need to be aiming for.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive, everyone. We are wrapping up our exploration of Indian urbanization. It's really crucial for understanding where India is headed.
Absolutely. And of course, for those UPSC exams, you know it's going to be a hot topic.
It will be. We've tackled the challenges, we've explored some solutions, and now it's time to zoom in on a key driver of change.
I'm excited for this one.
What's that?
Technology.
Yeah, technology and innovation, they're playing a bigger and bigger role in shaping cities.
Not just in India, but all over the world.
So the question is, how can we use all these advancements to actually make our cities better?
More efficient, more sustainable, more livable. It's a huge opportunity.
I mean, every day there's a new buzzword. Smart cities, AI, Internet of Things.
Right, right.
But what do those actually mean in the context of Indian cities?
Yeah, let's break it down. Let's start with e-governance. It's already making a difference in a lot of cities.
Oh, e-governance. So like using digital platforms to make things easier for citizens.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Streamlining service delivery, improving transparency, making it easier for people to interact with the government.
So things like paying bills online, applying for permits, those kinds of things.
Exactly.
It sounds convenient, but what's the bigger picture here?
Well, it's about more than just convenience. E-governance has the potential to really reduce corruption.
Oh, whoa.
To make the government more accountable.
And to make those services accessible to everyone, even in those marginalized communities?
Absolutely. It's about using technology to empower people.
So it's not just about making things easier, it's about making things fairer.
Exactly.
I like that. Okay, so e-governance is one area where we're seeing some real progress. What about other sectors?
Well, transportation is another big one. We talked earlier about those smart traffic management systems.
Right, using sensors to optimize traffic flow.
Yeah, but cities are also looking at electric buses, ride-sharing platforms, even autonomous vehicles.
Whoa, autonomous vehicles in India. That sounds pretty futuristic.
It does, doesn't it? But it also raises some important questions.
Like what?
Well, how do we make sure this technology is implemented safely and ethically?
Right.
What about the jobs that could be lost because of automation?
Those are really important considerations. We don't want to create new problems while we're trying to solve old ones.
Exactly. Technology is a powerful tool, but it's not a magic wand. We have to be very thoughtful about how we use it.
It's about using technology to make things better for people, not just to replace people.
I think that's a really important point. We have to keep people at the center of these solutions.
Okay, so moving on to another big challenge, waste management. Any tech solutions popping up in that area?
Oh, definitely. There are sensor-based waste bins that can tell sanitation workers when they're full.
Oh, so no more overflowing bins.
Hopefully not. And there are advanced sorting and recycling facilities that can really help us reduce the amount of waste that ends up in landfills.
So it's about making the whole waste management process more efficient and sustainable.
Exactly.
Love it. Okay, what about water scarcity? That's a huge problem for a lot of Indian cities.
It is, and there's some really interesting tech solutions being developed.
Oh, like what?
Well, cities are using sensors and data analytics to track water usage patterns.
To see where the water's going and how much is being wasted.
Exactly. And they can also use that data to optimize the distribution systems so that water is getting to the people who need it most.
That's smart. What about finding new sources of water?
Some cities are even looking into desalination technologies.
Desalination.
Yeah, it's a way of removing salt from seawater to create fresh water.
Oh, wow. So turning salt water into drinking water.
Exactly. It's a bit more expensive, but it could be a real game changer for coastal cities.
That's amazing. So it seems like technology really can play a huge role in helping us address these urban challenges.
It can, but we have to remember that technology is a tool, not a solution in itself.
Right. It's how we use it that really matters.
And we have to be very deliberate and strategic in how we apply it.
So for all those UPSC aspirants out there, what are some key takeaways they should be thinking about when it comes to technology and urban development?
Well, the biggest one is that technology isn't just about gadgets, it's about systems.
Right. It's about how we use technology to improve the way our cities function.
And when you're thinking about policy recommendations, don't just focus on the technology itself. Think about the bigger picture, the social impact, the economic impact.
And make sure that the technology is actually benefiting everyone.
Not just a select few.
So tech savvy, but also people-centric. I like that. Now, looking ahead, what are some of the biggest opportunities and challenges you see at the intersection of technology and Indian urbanization?
Well, I think one of the biggest opportunities is in using data.
Data.
Yeah, we generate so much data every day through our phones, our cars, everything we do. If we can harness that data effectively,
We can really make our cities smarter.
exactly, we can use it to improve planning, to
Yeah.
make better decisions about infrastructure investments.
So using data to make smarter decisions, not just more decisions.
Exactly. But that also brings up some challenges. Data privacy, data security, those are big concerns.
Oh, for sure. We have to make sure that data is being used ethically and responsibly.
And that people have control over their own information. We can't just let companies or governments collect and use data without any oversight.
That's a really important point. We need strong regulations and ethical frameworks to guide all of this.
Absolutely. We have to strike that balance between innovation and responsibility.
Make sure that technology is empowering people, not controlling them.
Exactly.
Well, this has been an amazing deep dive. Seriously, so many insights, so much food for thought.
It's been a pleasure.
So as we wrap up this episode, what are some final words of wisdom for our listeners, especially those getting ready for the UPSC?
The future of India's cities is being shaped right now,
That's true.
and it's a future that's going to be shaped by technology.
So understanding those challenges, embracing those opportunities, and making sure the technology is being used for good.
Those are the key themes for any aspiring policymaker.
So well said. And for all of you dedicated UPSC aspirants out there, remember to like, subscribe, and leave your questions in the comments below. Good luck with those exams, everyone.
The challenges are big, but the opportunities are even bigger. Your solutions could really make a difference in shaping the future of India's cities.
And with that inspiring thought, we're wrapping up our deep dive into Indian urbanization. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing, keep those ambitions soaring.
And don't forget to check out that Indian Express article, Indian Urbanization. Challenges and solutions to really dive deep into all these topics.
Excellent advice. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the most important issues facing India today.